Pretty much as long as I can remember. Nearly every single person in my life has been in a state of constant surprise that I've never played Secret of Mana. It does seem like a huge miss, having received critical acclaim when it was first released for everything from its gameplay to its soundtrack, even compared positively against both Legend of Zelda and Final Fantasy. A reputation like that and having the same conversation about never giving it a try are a good incentive, but time and a huge backlog make building up the motivation difficult. Now, with a ground-up remake Secret of Mana HD on offer, that time has finally come. The story is your basic saving the world fantasy. A young boy finds a magic sword and rallies together heroes to fight a great evil. To me, what really sets Secret of Mana apart from the other titles released in the same era is the strength of its character writing. Although Prim and Popoi conveniently fall in with you, each develops a good reason to continue the quest and have their own character moments rather than becoming accessories to the main plot. Inns become a destination to seek out simply for the short exchanges shared before turning in for the night, where the characters talk about their past, discuss current events, encourage each other, or just pick on one another. I absolutely love what the Rimke has done with the visuals of this game. It perfectly captures that over-designed early 90s look in 3D and has so many tiny details like the thickness of the tails on Randy's headband, the innkeeper's bizarre dance, and the tiny animations included in various character interactions. It's hard not to smile every time you see Popoi's toothy grin or Prim's hair standing straight out when she's yelling. The characters are unbelievably charming, and different camera angles used during cinematics only make them look better. The opening cinematic also had a seriously cool moving Yoshitaka Amano style painting aesthetic. Combat is pretty simple but probably somewhat revolutionary for when the game was released. Taking place in real time, you have a stamina bar that refills after each strike, causing dramatically reduced damage unless you give yourself time to recover. You can also charge up an even more devastating strike by avoiding damage while holding down the attack button. Most combat can be summed up as keeping away from enemies until you're ready to make your attack and trying to place your attacks where they can be most effective, often by keeping as many enemies knocked down and unable to attack at once as possible. Your two partners both have a growing number of attack and utility spells you can use as needed. If you played the original Secret of Mana, for better or worse, more on worse later, the gameplay, AI, and controls been kept true to the original. There are a few quality of life upgrades, the most valuable being the ability to set abilities or weapons as hotkeys to the shoulder buttons, although only the one and not the two buttons for some reason, which relieve a lot of grief of switching between characters and navigating the ring menus to get to Prim and Popoi's healing and attack spells. For anyone coming in fresh or, worse, having never experienced an early 90s rebound spur game, expect some frustrating trials and tribulations. Playing SNES-era titles really makes me appreciate how far video games have come since the days when games didn't even give you the stats on a piece of equipment. Many aspects of the title that were considered innovative at the time are showing their age, like the lauded ring menus, which now feel cumbersome and have me fondly reminiscing for shoulder button drop-down menus with custom button assignments. In this case, I probably would have even preferred traditional scrolling menus over the awkwardness of never quite remembering which way the direction buttons are going to rotate the menu, and the clearest means of discovering which character you're currently piloting being turning your controller over to see what color it's glowing. Combat itself is similarly frustrating. Even with some simple AI presets, there really is no way for you to keep your allies from standing out in the open to get hit by O attacks or get themselves caught on corners when trying to rush to your aid. Even with the hotkeys, jumping in and out of the menu feels far from smooth. On-target spells basically freeze your character in place during their animation. Popoi joins at level 1 when you're a level 10, so you're forced to grind to keep them from getting one shot in the next dungeon. Downed opponents have a delay before they take damage from hits, which feels bizarre. 1,000 tiny things we take for granted not having to suffer after 20 years of gaming development prune them away. Much of my experience with this game can be summarized as discovering frustrating old-school mechanics and wondering why they decided to leave them in. Treasure chests, which seem to be trapped more often than not, disincentivize you to even bother for what is likely a gold reward smaller than an average enemy drop. In the modern day, someone in the design room would probably have spoken up about how RNG damage from drops needlessly punishes the player. Many quality of life changes feel as if they've been overlooked. Why not add descriptions so you know what consumables do, or provide a visual indication that there are more menu rings if you press up or down? I realize Square Enix is in something with a catch-22 with this release. Even as I'm criticizing their decision not to retune, or even completely renovate, the game's menus and combat, There are probably other reviewers out there that would be equally critical of them for gutting the game if they had chosen to go ahead with those sort of changes. There's a distinct gap between designing this game for fans of the original or new players. I may be biased, but after 25 years, perhaps the new player should have taken priority. With additions like the hotkeys, I get the distinct feeling there were some good ideas thrown around during the development that may not have made it into the final product. Complaints aside, I admit it's pretty easy to see why the game was popular enough to justify such a complete visual reconstruction. As someone who was playing games around the time Secret of Mana was released, I can see that it was very different than most RPGs during that period, which were predominantly turn-based menu navigators. There were a lot of great new ideas in the original design, and it had fantastic character writing and pacing to match. I caught myself doing that thing that only the best RPGs can get me to do, where I decide to take a break after a dungeon, compromise about upgrading my items before putting the controller down, then find myself walking right into the next one. If you're a fan of Secret of Mana and you've been wanting to play it again, then this game definitely delivers with a fantastic visual upgrade that keeps the original aesthetic. If you're familiar with RPGs from its era and try this out, it's definitely a nostalgic title to try out. If you have never played and rebounds per game made before the year 2000, the game design might just come off as bizarre and illogical. The only way to get past the bad AI is the same as it was in 1993, by grabbing two friends to play your allies for you. As it is, it feels as if Secret of Mana HD was made for hardcore fans of the original, potentially at the cost of new players. While there's definitely a lot to love about Secret of Mana, a visual update alone does little to hide its age. Review roundup plus awesome ground-up visual redesign plus charming writing and characters plus quality voice acting plus DualShock Lite changes color with character, no changes to many frustrating aspects of combat, lack of information in menus, in-game directions are often unclear. Peter Fabian is features and reviews editor for Crunchyroll, author of monthly Mangaka Spotlight, writer for Anime Academy, and contributor at Anime Feminist. You can follow him on Twitter at Peter Fabian.